Hey everyone, it's Eric. Welcome to Brook to River Fly Fishing. If you're watching this, it's probably because you're interested in figuring out how to set up a Euro rig for steelheading. Y'all, I know there are tons of ways to catch steelhead. I really think that when conditions are right, that tight lining for steelhead is the most effective way to catch a bunch of steelhead in a short amount of time. Some of you may have seen my epic video from a couple of weeks ago where I fished in 16 inches of snow in Erie and still managed to catch 7 steelhead. That's not normal conditions, although it is possible. The year before this year, when I had my one day of steelhead fishing, I had a lot better conditions and I actually landed 25 steelhead that day. And while 25 is the most steelhead I've ever landed in a day, I also had a day where I landed 17 and I also had a day where I landed 15. My goal today is to show you the way that I rig my Euro setup for steelhead so that you can have a lot of success while you're tight lining for them as well. When I'm fishing this type of Euro rig for steelhead, I'm trying to target fish that are in medium slow to fast water. It's not as effective when I'm fishing this in really slow, deep pools. There's usually a better method of fishing some type of indicator setup for that. Catching these big, strong steelhead, especially the fresh ones, is not for the faint of heart. You better have your gear dialed in and you better have tested it beforehand. So let's talk about the rod for a little bit. My dedicated Steelhead rod, I just got this a couple of years ago. It's a 6-weight, 10-foot, 10-inch Diamondback Ideal Nymph, and it's made specifically for steelheading for Great Lakes steelhead. Now, if I'm being honest, the one thing that I wish that this rod did a little bit better was that I wish it had a little bit more backbone. The reel that I pair with this rod for steelheading is a Redington Tilt. This reel is 5.7 ounces completely empty, but you can see I've got a Euro line on here, as well as a leader, and as well as one of these 1 ounce weights. Any reel that you use for steelheading needs to have a good drag system. If it doesn't have a good, strong, but also smooth drag system, you're not going to land many of these big, strong fish. You do really want to make sure that your reel is full cage if you can get one like that. These steelhead are pretty unforgiving as far as equipment. If you have your line or your leader that goes through that gap in the cage and you have a steelhead that you hook, it's going to break you off every time. Surprisingly, this is the same reel that I run on my longer trout rods. It's one of the reasons why I like it is I can pull it off of my other rod and put it onto my steelhead rod just by moving some of the weights around. If you like today's video, please hit that subscribe button. Also, feel free to comment with any questions or concerns that you have. I'd love to help you out if I can. Let's talk about my leader setup. I've tried everything from 20-pound flat mono down to about 8-pound mono. I've used tapered leaders. I've also used flat leaders. What I've found to be the best for me, and you might like something different, is just 10-pound Maxima, flat through, no taper, no knots, other than to put my cider, which is just bicolor cider, onto that 10-pound mono. The reason that I prefer this 10-pound Maxima for my leader is that it's thick enough diameter that when your big steelhead make that initial run, that you're not going to cut your line hand up with it as quick as something with a smaller diameter. I'll do something like 35 feet of this 10-pound Maxima. I just use a perfection loop on the end of this, loop it onto the end of my Euro nymphing line, blood knot it to my bicolor cider, and then put a tippet ring on the end of that. Anytime you fish a Maxima leader like this though, when you're taking your leader off the rod, you want to stretch it. Before you fish it, stretch it to get all that memory out. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of tangles. Now, for most of my trout fishing these days, I'm running 4X Adams mono. I know there are some people that like to run the same Adams, but just in a heavier diameter for steelhead leader, like 1X or 2X, something like that. That would certainly work as well. I don't steelhead often enough to make it worth spending $30 for a spool of this heavy Adams mono when I'm only going to use it for one day out of the year. So I stick with the 10-pound flat Maxima. As far as what I'm running on my rig, it's pretty common for me to run some type of an egg pattern, whether that's a peg bead, whether that's some sort of blob or some other sort of egg pattern that I've tied. Ecstasy eggs work really well. Also, just lots of variations of your standard egg patterns work great as well. One thing that I do almost all the time is run some sort of nymph as a trailer. So I'll run my blue steel caddis nymph. I have some of these little purplish black stoneflies, just regular black stoneflies work really well. But I love the combination of an egg attractor and a little nymph, and I'll explain how I do that in just a little bit. I want to show you how I have my rig set up for winter and fall steelheading. There's a reason that I do this. One thing that's super important to know is that in wintertime, when the water temperatures are cold, those steelhead are right on the bottom of the river, which means you got to get both of your flies down to their level. If you run the heavy fly on the point and you run a tag with a light fly up above it, that light fly is not going to be anywhere near the bottom of the river where those fish are at. The idea here is simple. I need to get everything down near the bottom. So I have my split shot to get me down. They're going to see my egg pattern come through first, and then they're going to see this little nymph trailing behind it. This is not heavily weighted. If it is, it'll get snagged over and over again. It's amazing how many times they'll see that attractor egg fly, won't hit it, and then will hit the light point fly behind it. This is not what you would consider a typical Euro nymphing rig, in the sense that I have split shot on my rig. Now I want you to imagine that this line where the split shot is the end of my tippet that's coming down from my sighter, and then I have my tag. Now you're going to notice that I have my tag coming off of this tippet ring. Here's the reason why I run my tags off of this tippet ring like this. Over the years I've tried lots of different knots for creating this tag right here. And what I found is this. Some are better than others, but all of them break. And I got so tired of hooking fish on my tag here and losing them that I really needed another solution. I've tried every single one of those tag knots that I can find, and this tippet ring connection like this is by far the strongest. As soon as I switched to using this tippet ring to create my tags, I stopped losing fish on the tag. What I won't do for this tag is I won't go any longer than this. This is about 5, maybe 6 inches. That's as long as I want this. That still gives me the ability to change my egg, to change my hook, to change my bead, and have a little bit of tag to work with. But if I get it too much longer than this, it will start getting wrapped around the other piece of tippet that's coming down here. I have my tag here to my beaded egg with my hook 2 finger lengths below. And then I have my long section of tippet down to what would be my point fly. In this case, my point fly is a size 16 little purple and black stone fly. That's pretty lightly weighted. Now for my knots to my tippet ring, I just use regular clinch knots. I usually run either 3 or 4x tippet to all of my connections. And with this heavier tippet, I've never had an issue with my clinch knots. I prefer fishing 3x when conditions allow, so that would be any time that the water levels are raised, or if there's any type of stain or color to the water. It lets you fish the thicker diameter, stronger tippet. If the water is low and clear and the fish are spooky, you're going to probably have to go to the 4x tippet. You will probably lose some more fish fishing the 4x tippet than you will with the 3x, but that's just kind of part of the deal. If you don't hook them, you can't land them, and if you hook them on 4x, there's still that chance that you're going to land a pretty good number of fish. Now I know what you're probably thinking, but won't those split shot get tangled? And the answer is sometimes, but I'd rather get some tangles and have my flies where the fish are than have 0 tangles and not catch any fish because I don't get deep enough. If your weight isn't right, if your depth isn't right, you're not going to catch as many fish as you could. You have to get your weight right, you have to get your depth right so that your flies are presented where the fish are, especially when the water's cold. Because when the water's cold, they're less likely to move and they're less likely to leave their lies where they're at to chase something that's to the side of them. During this day 2 years ago, I came up to a run that was like chest deep that I knew had some fish in it, and there was a lot of current. So I had on 2 split shot like this when I started. I couldn't even begin to get down. So I added a 3rd. Still couldn't feel the bottom. Couldn't get anywhere near it. 4th, by the time I got to the 5th split shot, was the first time that I felt my rig tick the bottom. And then I nailed 5 steelhead in a row out of that same run, one after the next after the next. Especially when I'm steelheading, I'm always carrying a big selection of split shot with me. Dom on Trout Bitten talks about this a lot, about using this puck. It's very simple to get your shot in and out with this. Put the lid back on, stick it in your vest pocket. You need to have different sizes because sometimes you just need a little bit of weight, sometimes you need a lot of weight. Carry a variety is a big key of steelheading. Another thing that I've learned is that you have to check everything. Now, I've had really good success with Trout Hunter Tippet, but a few years ago I ordered a brand new spool of 3X and 4X Tippet, a different brand, took it up there without testing it first, and the tippet wouldn't even hold a knot that was lubricated. So now I have 1 day to fish and I have no good tippet, which as you can guess was a problem. So now I test absolutely everything. I test my tippet, I test my leaders, I test every single knot that I tie, I stress test it really hard and yank on it with a lot of pressure, because if I can break it, a steelhead's gonna break it. And I'd rather have me do it than a big fish. I'm gonna talk for a minute about the stuff that I wear that keeps me warm and dry and comfortable while I'm out steelheading in some of these crazy conditions. I'm gonna start with the stuff that I wear on my legs. I have this base layer that I got from Cabela's. It's something like ECWCS base layer, polar weight. This stuff is amazing. This is like military grade, cold weather clothes. It was originally developed for like special ops, extended missions, that type of thing. It's waffle grid. It costs like 75, 80 bucks per piece, but it's totally worth it. On my legs I wear this, and then I wear a thick pair of warm-up pants. That's it. On my feet, I typically wear 2 pairs of wool socks. I've tried it with one. Don't recommend it unless it's really warm. Maybe in the spring season you can get away with it. If it's fall or winter, I got 2 pairs of socks on. My boots, I've just got my Corker boots. These are the aluminum bars. I like having these removable soles because I can swap them in and out. These are pretty big and heavy. I wouldn't use these everywhere. But for the slate bottom rivers that I fish a lot in, like the Lake Erie tribs, these get pretty good traction. Now for my upper body, I have another one of those polar weight base layers from Cabela's. Then I've got just like a thin wicking athletic shirt. I've got a North Face pretty thick fleece that I wear. And as long as it's not raining, that's good. But typically, it almost always has a chance of raining or being overcast up in the Erie tribs. So I almost always have my raincoat with me, not necessarily on. This is just like a $35 Field & Stream raincoat. But as you can see in my crazy extreme steelhead video, this combination of these things right here kept me warm and dry for the most part. Now on my head, if it's not too cold, I'll just wear my regular ball cap. A lot of times when it gets really cold out, I'll switch to this beanie. Sometimes if it's really, really cold or super windy, I wear this thing, which is basically like a ski mask, balaclava thing. Keeping your hands warm can be a challenge. I really like these just rag wool fingerless gloves. I've had these for 10 years. They literally cost me like 8 bucks. And I've worn them every winter, all winter long, which is mostly when I fly fish in Virginia and also when I'm steelheading. My $8 gloves, and then I've got hand warmers that I put in my wader pocket or my jacket pocket, something like that. Another thing that I really won't go steelheading without is one of these wade staffs. This is just on a retractor that I put on my belt, but I'm not really familiar with these rivers that well, so having a wade staff for an extra set of support, as well as to feel the bottom and see if there's any drop-offs or things while I'm wading, is super important to staying safe. Another piece of gear that's super important while you're fly fishing for steelhead is some really good polarized glasses. These are Smith Ignitors. These are the Guide's Choice model. I love these. These are specifically made with yellow or amber lenses for fishing low light conditions, which most of the time when you're fishing in the Erie tribs or other Great Lake tribs, that's what you're going to have in the cold winter months. These Ignitors let in enough light that even when it's raining or snowing or overcast, you can still see into the water as long as it's not super dirty and spot fish that are on the bottom. Thanks for watching this brook to river fly fishing tutorial on how to rig and successfully target steelhead. I hope that it's helpful to you. I hope that you'll subscribe to the channel, share with your friends, and now that you've set up and rigged your rod for steelheading, you go catch some steelhead. Bye.